My girlfriend's best friend texted me. She's been using you. She told us everything. I replied, tell me. When she sent voice recordings of my girlfriend bragging about training me to pay for everything while she saved for her post-breakup apartment. I, 29 male, own a 3-bedroom house out in the suburbs, and until a few weeks ago, I lived there with my now ex-girlfriend, 27 female. She moved in exactly 18 months ago. We had been dating for 2 years before that, and when her old apartment lease ended, she sat me down at the kitchen table with a literal spreadsheet. She laid out her massive student loan debt and proposed a plan that sounded reasonable at the time. If she moved in with me, I would cover the mortgage, utilities, and the main groceries. In exchange, she promised to take her entire paycheck and aggressively pay down her debt, so we could eventually start our lives together with a totally clean slate. I agreed to it. I took on about 90% of our living expenses and even picked up extra freelance coding contracts on the weekends just to make sure we maintained a comfortable lifestyle while she was supposedly making all these financial sacrifices. Fast forward to a random Tuesday afternoon. I was working from my home office when my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from her best friend. The two of them had been inseparable since college, so hearing from her wasn't entirely unusual, but the text itself was jarringly blunt. It just said that my girlfriend had been using me and that she had told their friend group everything. I just stared at the screen for a minute. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I finally just typed back, tell me. 5 seconds later, a cluster of 6 audio files dropped into our chat. I plugged in my headphones, my heart beating a little faster, and pressed play on the first file. The background noise was clearly a busy brunch spot with clinking glasses and overlapping chatter. Then, my girlfriend's voice came through. It was crystal clear and dripping with this absolute arrogance I had never heard from her before. She was bragging to her friends, saying she had me completely trained. She laughed about how I covered the mortgage, the bills, the dinners out, and how she hadn't paid a single dime in over a year. Another girl's voice in the recording asked about her student loans, and my girlfriend just let out this sharp, grating laugh. She told them her parents had actually paid those loans off 3 years ago. She bragged that her savings account was massive now and casually mentioned she had just signed a lease on her new post-breakup apartment downtown. She said once the keys were in her hand next month, she was ghosting me. She just needed me to cover her expenses for 4 more weeks. I sat there in total silence while the audio files kept playing. She went into detail about how she would fake stress over money to get me to pay for her car repairs and mocked the extra weekend hours I worked. I didn't throw anything. I didn't yell. I just calmly opened my laptop and logged into our home network. Her tablet was synced to our shared cloud storage, so I searched her recent downloads. Right there at the top was a PDF titled with a unit number for a lease agreement. I opened the document. It was a lease for a luxury high-rise downtown, and the rent was $4,000 a month. I scrolled down to the signature page. There was her signature as the primary tenant. But right below it, listed as the financial guarantor, was my name. My signature. Forged flawlessly. She had used my financial credentials and the pay stubs she had access to from my desk, and she forged my name to guarantee a lease she definitely couldn't qualify for on her own income. I texted the best friend back, asking why she was sending me all of this right now. She replied immediately, saying my girlfriend got drunk the night before and tried to sleep with her fiancé. The best friend was absolutely done with her and told me to use the recordings. I closed the laptop. The initial shock was completely gone, replaced by a cold, methodical focus. She wasn't just using me for free rent. She had committed identity theft. Wednesday morning, I called my lawyer. I explained the entire situation, forwarded the forged lease document, and played the audio files over the phone. My lawyer was very clinical about it. He told me that suing for the living expenses was pretty much a dead end in our state without a written contract, but the forged guarantor signature was a completely different story. Because the application was submitted electronically across state lines to the property management's corporate office, it crossed the line into felony identity theft and wire fraud. Following his exact instructions, I took the rest of the day off work. I immediately froze my credit across all 3 bureaus and placed a fraud alert on my Social Security number. Then, I drove down to the local police precinct and filed a formal police report for identity theft, handing over the forged lease and the audio recordings as evidence. Once I had the official police report number in hand, I called the luxury apartment's leasing office and spoke directly to the property manager. I informed them that the guarantor signature on that unit was forged, provided the police report number, and explicitly stated I would not be assuming any financial liability whatsoever. The manager was incredibly alarmed. They flagged the account right then and there and initiated a cancellation of her lease, pending their own corporate fraud investigation. On my way home, I stopped at an electronics store and bought 3 discrete, motion-activated security cameras with cloud recording. I set them up in the living room, the kitchen, and facing the front door. I checked the laws beforehand to make sure I was in the clear, and our state is a one-party consent state for recording conversations in a private residence where you are a participant. Thursday evening, I sat down and drafted a formal 30-day notice to quit. Since she wasn't on my mortgage and didn't pay any rent, she was legally considered a month-to-month tenant or a licensee. Serving her that 30-day notice was the legally required first step to terminate her residency. I had to play it completely cool until Friday evening so I could get all my ducks in a row. Friday at 6 p.m., she walked through the front door. She dropped her gym bag, smiled, and walked over to try and kiss my cheek. I took a step back and just handed her the printed 30-day notice to quit. She looked at the piece of paper, her brow furrowing in confusion. She asked if it was some kind of joke. I told her it was a formal eviction notice and that she had 30 days to vacate my property. She scoffed, crossed her arms, and asked if I was insane, reminding me that we lived together and I couldn't just kick her out because I was having a bad day. I didn't argue. I just pulled out my phone and pressed play on the brunch recording. Her own voice filled the hallway, bragging about how she had me completely trained and was planning to ghost me. The color completely drained from her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but absolutely nothing came out. I just watched the gears turning in her head as she realized her entire meticulously crafted reality was collapsing in real time. The shock only lasted a few seconds before her natural entitlement completely took over. She started shrieking, accusing me of invading her privacy by going through her things. She yelled that I owed her for the time she had invested in our relationship, claiming she gave me her best years. She flat out refused to leave, stating she had tenant rights and promising to make my life a living nightmare for the next 30 days. She even smugly added that I was still going to pay for her new place because I signed the guarantor form. I stayed completely calm and told her I didn't sign anything, but that she forged it. I let her know the property management company had already canceled her lease that afternoon after I provided them with a police report for identity theft. Her eyes went wide. Real panic finally set in, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. She grabbed a decorative vase from the console table and hurled it violently at the wall. It shattered into 100 pieces across the hardwood floor. Then she screamed that she would ruin me. She said she was going to tell everyone I hit her, get a restraining order, and force me out of my own house. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911, and walked out to the front porch. I stood perfectly still inside. I listened as she intentionally began to hyperventilate, sobbing hysterically into the phone. She told the dispatcher I was destroying the house, throwing things at her, and threatening her life. It was a classic, dirty legal maneuver. She was trying to use a false domestic violence claim to secure a temporary restraining order, which would legally grant her exclusive occupancy of my house while I had to fight it from the outside. 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up with their lights flashing. 4 police officers approached the house. She ran right up to them, crying her eyes out, pointing at me standing quietly in the doorway. The lead officer stepped up, his hand resting cautiously near his duty belt. He told me to step outside and asked her if she was injured. She wailed that I threw a vase at her, pointing to the shattered glass inside the hallway, and claimed I said I was going to harm her if she didn't leave. The officer looked at me and said they were going to have to detain me while they sorted everything out. I kept my voice perfectly even. I told the officer that I had not raised my voice or laid a single finger on her. I explained that she threw the vase herself and I informed them that I had high-definition, cloud-backed video and audio of the entire interaction from the exact moment she walked in until she called them, captured by the security cameras in my living room. My ex stopped crying instantly. The silence on that porch was absolutely deafening. I pulled up the camera app on my phone and handed it directly to the officer. The cops gathered around and watched the footage. They watched me calmly hand her the eviction notice. They watched her throw the vase in a fit of rage. They watched her explicitly threaten to fake a domestic violence claim to steal my house. And they watched her dial 911 and begin her fake performance. The lead officer shook his head, handed my phone back to me, and turned to my ex. She was already slowly backing away toward the lawn. He told her to turn around and place her hands behind her back. She started thrashing, screaming that she was scared and they couldn't arrest her. The officer flatly stated she was under arrest for filing a false police report and misuse of the 911 emergency system. The handcuffs clicked into place, and they put her in the back of the cruiser. She just glared at me through the glass as they drove away. Her massive sense of entitlement had finally collided with actual real-world consequences. Because she was arrested for a crime related to false allegations and a domestic disturbance at my property, my lawyer filed an emergency ex parte protective order the very next morning. The judge granted it immediately based on the police report and the video evidence I provided. This protective order legally barred her from coming within 500 feet of me or my residence, which entirely superseded any 30-day tenant rights she thought she had. I spent the afternoon packing all of her belongings into heavy-duty garbage bags, dragged them down to the edge of the driveway, and texted her parents to come collect her stuff. The legal cascade, after that, was absolute. 2 weeks later, she appeared in criminal court for the false police report. It was a Class A misdemeanor in our jurisdiction. She pleaded no contest just to avoid jail time and was hit with a year of probation, massive fines, and a permanent criminal record. But that was honestly just the beginning of her problems. The district attorney's office, heavily prompted by the luxury apartment complex's corporate lawyers, picked up the identity theft charge regarding the lease forgery. Because she used digital communications across state lines to commit the fraud, the charges were escalated. She was officially indicted on felony forgery charges. Her parents ended up draining their own savings just trying to hire a decent defense attorney for her. She actually managed to call me from an unknown number one night. She was sobbing, begging me to speak to the DA, pleading with me to tell them it was all just a big misunderstanding. I just reminded her that she was the one who trained me, and I was just following the curriculum. Then I hung up and blocked the number. She lost her cushy corporate marketing job the exact moment the felony charges became public record. With absolutely no income, no luxury downtown apartment, and her massive savings account entirely wiped out by her legal retainer fees, she was forced to move back into her parents' tiny basement. She tried one last desperate move and attempted to sue me in civil court for promissory estoppel, claiming I had legally promised to support her lifestyle. The judge threw the case out with prejudice during the very first summary judgment hearing, heavily noting that her criminal fraud invalidated any equitable claims she thought she had against me. Looking back on it all, the initial betrayal definitely stung. Realizing someone you loved was just looking at you as a walking ATM is a hard pill to swallow. But getting to watch someone who honestly thought they were completely untouchable dismantle their own life purely through their own arrogance and entitlement was a profound education. I kept my house, my credit score, and my peace of mind. If you want to learn how to expertly draft a bulletproof eviction notice while keeping a perfectly straight face during a fake crying fit, hit that subscribe button below.